this computer. All right, welcome to book party number 4 for Verse Virtual. The concept behind it is very simple. We know that a lot of writers did not get a chance to have a book launch during the pandemic, which hasn't ended yet, and book launches are still scarce. So Neil Creighton in Australia had asked me if there was some possibility he could promote his latest book at one of our regular readings. And that started me thinking, why don't we do something a little different than just a poetry reading? And from that was born this concept, which I've compared to speed dating, because you have 5 minutes to convince us that you're worth going out with. So, having said that, Gary, you are up first. Tell us about your book and read us a poem or two. You've got 5 minutes.
It's called A Careful Contrition, and it's from Shanti Arts Publishing, and not a bad deal. It's got a quite eclectic cover, and I think I'm going to start with a poem entitled Awaiting the Deal. And let me see if this can work, if I can sort of set up a little mood music here.
Okay.
It will help. Awaiting the Deal. A woman plays soft jazz at the piano, and I am here to meet night rising, afloat on expectation and Prosecco, closing eyes in hope that the evening ahead leads toward a tomorrow unlike any of thousands I have known. Already wondering if I can forgive the haze of disappointment that inevitably follows. Like seeing that news anchor without her makeup, reaching for a quart of milk in the wee hours of morning, a strange, disheveled ghost. I managed then the stone-faced denial of recognition, pretending to be polite stranger saint of 24/7 grocery store aisle, he who sees nothing outside of dreams. The notes trip pleasantly around lyrics of a journey in smoky blue, and still I dread the compromise, the rib given up for companion, the taste of forbidden fruit, the serpent's clever insinuation. Sensuality hovers like a promise, as it must. International intrigue dominating thoughts of conversation, the silky allure of some foreign culture's colorful entreaty. Reminds me of that sultry penthouse party at the pop art icon's commercial behest. All the pretty people staring out in mutual admiration, making important calls that never quite connected. I read the pain in the model's eyes before realizing the actual scars that sang out to millions on tabloid pages. I understood how such beauty might drive a madman over the edge forever. It's a world of harsh injustice. I thanked her for the smile, but she soon left with another. At such times, even the familiar gets lost in a fog of impropriety, and waking with views of the park seems technicolor false, another postcard from someone's stolen mail, reality drifting away like those tiny people out on the street below. Minor chords invite trepidation, and I heed their unresolved warnings. Praying to gods of blurred boundary, I write out elongated hours until dawn, playing my part, dressed to the nines with careful designer flair, on my impresario's vigil solo. No seconds in my corner to cajole and encourage as I mentally recite calculated pitch and make it sound spontaneous as hell. This is the curse of my blessing, the ceaseless stories that form into a life reflected in shoes well shined. There's something sentimental here, worth your long-term investment. A 9-part documentary of serious intent. It will offer heartbreak, tenderness, and currents of social responsibility, discussed from the safe distance of your offshore havens, the ones you'll swear never, ever exist. Is that woman still playing? While I was sitting pondering a special request for luck, she appears to have vanished.
Wow. More poems like that in your book?
Yes, that's more fun like that. Not with the music necessarily, but yeah, it's quite an interesting. That's actually about 5 different memories from the 1980s thrown together into one crazy, crazy story.
Interesting. You know, they make greeting cards. When you open them, they play. For your next book, you can have an embedded chip. So when you open the book, it plays the music behind the poems.
That would be marvelous. I hope it didn't distract. I hope it only set the scene and the mood.
It was actually nice music. You'll have to pop into the comments and tell us what you were playing.
I will. I definitely will.
Okay. Our next book promoter is Cindy Rinne. Make sure you unmute yourself before you talk.
Okay.
Okay. You are up.
Thank you. My book is called Silence Between Drumbeats, and this is
Okay.
my fiber art on the cover. I'm also an artist, and it's a collection of poems. A little bit about myself. I create fiber art and live in and write in San Bernardino, California. I'm a represented poet by Lark Gallery in LA and a pushcart nominee. My poems have appeared in literary journals, anthologies, actually Betsy Marr's anthology, who's here, and others. I'm going to read one of the blurbs. Cindy Rinne's majestic poems lure you into a liminal space where spirit and flesh are intrinsically bound. An infinite blues from song to sky, silence between drum beats evokes the vision and lyricism of Joe Harjo. Rinne's work is an ancestral balm, a meditation in loss and reunion, violation and healing, hope and reclamation. In this silence, there is wonder, the creation of world, what is, and what will be. Romaine Washington. So all these poems have been written since last March. So it's exciting to be able to get a book published already. This has been published by Written by Veterans. And I'm going to read my first poem. Climb, tumble, dance. After performative ecologies. Wow, okay. Timeless sulfur smokes, drifts over her strong antler as the horn shape repeats in tree branches that reach misty peaks behind this canyon dancer. When is the point of rising? Her voice recovers from the burning body as landscape vibrates through muddy river sounds across countries, walls. She reads auras for 7 years, shaken turquoise stones as living books tumble in her hands, touch edge. An offering, red-eared and sweet as she shares her strum of wings. Who is really in a cage? She climbs a birch ladder, chants to the breathing sea, an ancient song, and blends into swollen clouds. Then curves, sways as a blessing in the musty swamp. Ritual energy swirls long after she departs. And then a short poem, Do What Seems Impossible. I wake up inside the lower world, a thundering waterfall, yells, we do not believe in ghosts. Then I rub honey all over my body like drinking the soul of tea from a crescent moon. This basin, a place of unforgiveness or love, attracts ancestors drumming, echoes inside. And
I have a question for you.
okay,
Where do you live?
in San Bernardino,
Okay. The reason
not
I
far
ask is
from
because
Cal
I'm
State.
hearing a lot of Southwest experience. I'm from New Mexico. I lived on the Navajo reservation for several years. So a
Yes,
lot of that resonated.
Native American traditions are very important to me. I've done some of the medicine wheel and different ceremonies. And I've been to New Mexico and Arizona. So definitely there's spirituality, I would say, throughout the book. I do a lot of myth, creation myths, but there's also some justice poems in here, social justice poems. Oh, I didn't mention the forms. If I have a second, I have erasure, centos, found poem, ekphrastic, and even a short fairy tale.
Wonderful. Hold the cover of your book up again. Let us see.
Okay. So this is the Circle of Incarceration poem. And there's some text on here from the poem. It's a cento I put together.
And silent between drum beats. Great.
Thank you.
So if you will put your info in the chat, and I will collate that for the YouTube video.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gayle, it's your turn.
All right. Hi, I'm Gayle Lindsay Slaten, and my book, you can see it here, it's called Self-Portraits of a Runaway Wife, and it's a healing journey after leaving an abusive relationship 10 years ago. So this is more than 10 years in the making. I've been a writer my whole life. I've been the poetry editor for 3 years for the online magazine downtownlalife.com and some other places, but this is my first book, and it's on Kindle and on Amazon. And I'd like to read 3 short poems just to give you a sense of some of it. This one is called Decades. Out of sync with life, her first decade was spent as a 20-year-old, caring for siblings, mothering the brood, making rules for others to uphold. Her second decade was spent as a 40-year-old, Dear Abby, counseling her young peers, peacemaker and overseer of others' love lives. Her third decade was spent as a 50-year-old, settling into her duties, gathering objects of others' desires, Balabusta and chef, a welcoming hostess. Her fourth decade was spent as a teenager, breaking out of old confines, trying out new lovers, self-absorbed, shirking responsibilities. Her fifth decade was spent as an 80-year-old, settled and safe in the prison of life made small, waiting for death. And now, in her sixth decade, perhaps she can make up for lost time, pursuing her fanciful dreams of childhood, banging pots to create rhythms, crayoning her life back to color.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you. The next one is called Chaos Unbroken. When in chaos, be the eye of the storm. When overwhelmed, breathe into your heart. Remember the unbroken chain of love that surrounds you, enfolds you, protects you. When all is lost, have tea and cookies. Gaze at sunsets. Beat a drum to your heart rhythm. Remember, you can never be broken. You are whole. Find your inner light and turn it up until you remember. You are a radiant being. You are perfectly imperfect. And the lessons are in that imperfection. Honor the chaos as your teacher. Sit with the overwhelm. Let go of what you think you lost. Make space for the next adventure and embrace this life with joy. And I have one last one called Finally. I'm finally comfortable in my own skin. I think that's because it's so loose now. I have room to move around in there, and when I stretch, it has a lot of give. Why didn't I think of getting a skin size bigger before? Always worried what I looked like, hiding the bulges beneath large tops, wearing lots of black. Now I'm comfortable in my skin. I look in the mirror and I'm pleased with the crepes. I always liked that texture before, but I didn't know it would go so well with my soul. So, and I don't remember if I told you that I did the painting on the front, so that's why there's more than one self-portrait.
Delightful.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are next up, Kika. Unmute and go for it.
Hello, my name is Kika Dorsey, and I'm a poet and professor from Boulder, Colorado. And I'd like to introduce my book. It's called Occupied. Vienna is a broken man and daughter of hunger. So I wrote this book after my mother died of Alzheimer's. I was managing her care. She was Austrian and grew up in post-war Austria, and always told me stories about her hunger. And so I recreated some of her stories in poems for the first half, and I also did a vast amount of research about that time period. And so the first half of the book is very historical, with sort of fictional characters, mostly mothers and children. The second half of the book are personal poems about my own life and my own legacy, growing up with my mother and my mentally ill father, who actually committed suicide in Vienna, which is when I brought her back from Europe to manage her care. So I'm going to read a couple of poems. This one is the first poem from the first section, and it's called Hunger. I'm hungry all the time. We forage in the Alps for mushrooms and elderberry blossoms that we dip in cornmeal and fry from the butter of a neighbor's cow. The oak and beech disappear as I climb further to fir, larch, and pine. I pick edelweiss and arnica to set in the blue glass vase on our table. We eat the polenta with what we have gathered, and Mutti is always angry, Fati a traveling tailor and never around, hungry stepchildren. Once we accidentally ate poisonous mushrooms. I knew something was wrong when the August light turned orange and from the faces of Russian soldiers emerged black beetles, and my brother lay holding his stomach and vomiting. My stomach is full of knives. It is an empty cavern where my dead mother dwells below budding breasts. Sometimes I want to cross the river Mur and never return. Sometimes the river roils in my body and I pull the sun into me. Sometimes I see a golden eagle on the elm tree. He looks royal, as if he's won a war. And then this poem is from the second half. It's called My House. My house sits heavy on my shoulders. I've muscled my way across lakes and pushed babies out of me, whom I set in the kitchen of my house next to blenders, high chairs, torn towels in the attic I save for my dreams. I walk with my house on my shoulders to a drugstore. They sell me pills that only I can swallow, made of strands of my mother's hair, my father's sharp teeth, my sister's dolls, and a white powder of promises from God's mouth, pledges of golden corn and rain. I swallow the pills and dream in the dark of my house floating on the sea, an old man on the roof fishing. When he catches one, he sets it on my lap, and I am hungry, but the fish has eyes like mine, so I throw it back to the sea. I am thirsty, but the sea is salt, so I let it feed the waves. I am a mother, so I am hungry and thirsty, and the Holy Ghost of my house has no wings, but windows where I can watch the rain. I wake up every day to the house pressing me, and I rise with its roof of mind and basement of feet, of ancestors and memory. I trudge under its weight, searching for land where I can set it down, where I won't crush a harvest or block a prairie dog burrow. And I keep going, my spine bowing, blackbirds chortling as if it were always dawn, as if the sun needs to be called home.
Wow.
So I want to quickly add, I wrote this book really also, and I mentioned this in the foreword, as a book of warning. What kind of world are we going to create when it's based on racism? And it's kind of a book of warning to the historical part of it.
It's fascinating. How many of you, well, I can tell several of you, how much of your poetry is produced from pain? because that's where most of mine comes from. And it doesn't have to be big pain, but most of what I write comes from the pain of being human and interacting with other people. And when I published my first book, one of my close friends read it, and her response was, I was hoping for something happier. I thought, I'm sorry, I don't write happy poetry. I write what I feel because I think people will connect with that. If you want happy poetry, go read a limerick. So, Alan and Sterling, if you are interested in so doing, feel free to grab a book and promote, because we don't have the other two that I had signed up. So I'm going to do a couple of, oh, that was me telling myself to stop. Sorry. I have two small chapbooks that I put together and actually did everything for them. I've wrote the poetry, took photographs, printed, bound them, and the first one was actually inspired. This is called In the Shadow of the Ark, with a public domain painting. This was inspired after a friend sent me a book that she had written called Answering the Cuttlefish, which was an answer to a book by Temple Cone called The Waters Beyond the Ark, which was an answer to Carmen Bernos de Gastold, who wrote Prayers from the Ark and the Creatures Choir in French. I was fortunate enough to speak and read French, so I was able to look at those. They were all takes on the biblical story of the Ark. So after having read all of those, I went ahead and put together a series of short poems from the perspective of things that were going to the Ark. I'm looking for the fun picture, the fun picture. Two by two. Well, Noah, here we are. Was it you who called us, pulled us away from our fun, our frolicking romps from sun up to sundown? Yes, yes, we know we can be useful too, beast of burden and all. But really, we must warn you, bring us into this floating farm, pin us together, boy and girl, there will be frequent offspring. Are you ready for that? And is there room? Oh, wait, we see you also come two by two, you humans. Well, all right, we see you understand. And no disrespect, sir, but you are a poor shadow of the man who gave us names. Still, you called, and here we are, unending beastly line, waiting for directions. So all the poems in there are done from the point of view of one sort of animal or something going into the Ark. The second chapbook is called The Plagues. And it was written with the same concept of, let's reimagine this story told from a different direction. And there are so many gruesome things in here. I'm going to pick one of the less gruesome, and it will still creep you, but that's okay. Each of the plagues of Egypt had a significant impact. And if you take something, because I have a medical background, I'm a nurse practitioner, things like the boils, the plague of boils, I have a really vivid picture of that because I've seen boils, but not to the extent that they're described. But if you were the boil, here's what you might say. All that came before was to prepare our way. Moses, the destroyer, turned water to blood, made Egypt filthy, covered their beds with frogs, their bodies with lice, their houses with flies, their fields with dead cattle. Egypt's pride is spoiled by two Hebrew brothers who take ash and soot from Pharaoh's furnace, scatter it to the wind, and her personal suffering begins. The touch of the blackened powder is the ember of God's anger as we, hated boils, swell, burst, and multiply. Those you cling to for protection, for relief, for comfort, are equally felled, festering and fearful, looking for death and finding none. Your gods are powerless, useless, magicians and priests alike, afflicted and impotent. In every painful eruption, you newly learn the meaning of the fire of affliction, so casually poured out on Jacob's sons. And so each of those poems has a reference back to, here's what this symbolizes, here's the type and shadow. And I had a lot of fun writing those. I will put the info in the comments a little bit later on how you can get them if you like. Alan or Sterling, would you like to present a book?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Alan. Sure. I've been fortunate these last few weeks, so.
All right. Thanks. I will. I know Betsy, who's listening, is probably going to have to go soon. And Betsy and I have a book together, believe it or not. And you see this delightful and stirring art behind me, which is part of the cover art of the book. The book is called In the Muddle of the Night, and they're pairs of poems, one each, one by Betsy, one by me, responding to similar prompts, similar themes. And the book is a huge success. Every time I look at the Amazon statistics, we fall another 100 or 500 places, even though Betsy and I are on a cross-country book tour, which is why I didn't offer to read at this reading. We've read so far in Sacramento, St. Paul, I don't want to make that mistake. Sacramento, St. Paul, Kentucky, and Oceanside, New York. And on April 6th, we'll be reading again from the book here in my hometown, Great Neck, New York, April 6th, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And you can find that link online as soon as I post it. The poem I'm going to read is continuing with the biblical theme. It's a poem about Moses coming down from the mountain, and this was part of a contest scheduled, set up by Alexandria Quarterly. And what they did was they presented a line from a famous poet and asked contestants, those who wanted to be in the contest, to place that line somewhere within their own poem. The line was from Gwendolyn Brooks, and it's a beautiful line. We are things of dry hours and the involuntary plan. I wrote this one involving that line, and Betsy wrote her own, and I'll tell you, one of us won the competition, and it wasn't me. It was Betsy. So you are not even getting to hear the second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place, or even an honorable mention poem. You're getting to hear one that's way down the line. It was accepted and judged not quite worthy, but I like the poem anyway. So it's called Rent Party. Moses came down from the mountain, plenty tired and more than a little singed from the nearness of the flame. And let's face it, wandering through the desert is no picnic, despite the occasional and incidental shrubbery. The hungry folks who drag their feet till now, kvetchy, out of sorts, weary of promises, no milk and honey far as they could see. And when he arrived, he expected a welcome? Man, what'd you expect while you were gone so long? Who wouldn't have worshiped the golden onion, or at least danced around its root? if only for dreams of some yet to be fried potatoes. He was finally spotted out the corner of one reveler's eye, but no one shouted from joy, "Hey, Moses is back." He muttered to himself something like, "We are things of dry hours and the involuntary plan," and knew this was not going to be an easy sell, especially for a guy slow of speech who dropped into this rent party while not totally uninvited with not much of a plan. Everybody knowing of his checkered past, and let's face it, no track record for bringing home the bacon. And what was this he was now carrying in his arms? More unpaid labor nobody was exactly praying for. Thanks, everybody. And I'll put the book information in the chat.
Thank you. That brings us to Sterling.
Okay, did I turn? Yeah,
You
okay,
are.
I'm unmuted. The first poem I'm going to read was, it's from my collection, Serpent's Tooth. And I don't know, I tried to use, hopefully it's not glaring like it did last week. Anyway, it just came out in actually the end of February, beginning of March. And this is one poem that was that it did appear in Verse Virtual last year. It's called Deja Vu, Wild One. Chopped hogs buzzing like open highway bumblebees. In my classic black motorcycle jacket, oily leather smells slap against the wind as I, a cool, conspicuous, hard tar bandit, led the HD posse through the flatlands and mountains, dodging two-wheel midlife rally questions. Blue and white collar homies joined forces. I recollect days before bulging bellies betrayed comfort-bound domestic roles. Though routes never differ, people change. I personally miss drivers flipping the bird, but resent requests to honk a Harley just like a trucker. The tubes enshrine burning rubber ballads, children of an easy rider generation. We roll out of sight, stylized helmets, mask our fearless, aging faces, 40-something outlaws, fierce silver warriors, longing for timeless envy, approval. So from a growing old poem to one that actually was inspired by my wife, although it's not about her. She hated Amazon.com till the pandemic last year. Now she's a fan. This is called Greta's Mirror. Brown eyes glare, fixate on walls, gaining renewed appreciation for communal cobwebs and scientific certainty of social justice between eight-legged architects, sticky silk arachnids, nests now hosting mere ectoskeletons. From spiderweb construction sites, Greta glances through bay view windows, noticing squirrels race around her front porch and mud swallows building nests under eaves, nature unhindered by quarantines. Greta's black pearl choker highlights her long neck, not kissed by outsiders since lockdowns began. Long bangs, now cropped and shaved, shaped like a postage stamps, adorn her head, and her thick, coarse bun emerges from a smooth, shadowy, feminine skull. Stark reflections today belie pure beauty tomorrow. With or without the benefit of artifice, she'll mingle among the masses, mouth showing teeth, laughter replacing pensive pondering, accepting a new normal, anxiously awaiting on Amazon to deliver earrings. Thank you.
I like it. You might want to work on adding more alliteration. I'm messing with you, Sterling.
Yeah. So I like alliteration, so.
I do too, and it can be really effective. I had a university professor from England who was a Shakespearean expert, world-renowned expert on Shakespeare, and his background and training was so attuned that if you used two words in a row that started with the same consonant, he would know what effect that was going to have on other readers, historically, who else had used that alliteration, and what it brought to what you were writing. He was absolutely incredible. And he made me really sensitive to the sounds that I use, what kinds of alliteration and when and where. It was a delightful time of life. So that's it. It was a small, wonderful party with all of you. I have a simple request that I've asked at the other book parties. I am building a verse virtual library, and if it is within your means and your kindness to do so, I would love to have a copy of the book you read from to add to that library. I will post my physical mail address in the chat so that you can have access to that. Additional parties. I think these have been really fun, and I don't feel like they need to have 1,000 people in attendance to be successful. I'll do what I can to promote the next one a little better. I'm finding that people are like me. There are so many things going on that you can't keep track of everything all at once. So we'll take care of that. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording